Hey everybody, how's it going? Happy New Year. It's our first Chai with Coaches live stream of 2021. Welcome back, Naheed.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to all our listeners. We were waiting for 2021 and it came in with a bang.
Yes, it did. It absolutely did. It's been a crazy year already, and it's only been what, like 2 weeks into the year so far?
I know, I think we're already exhausted and we were exhausted from last year.
Yes, yes. If you weren't exhausted after last year, you will be shortly. So, you know. But um, but yeah. So how's your New Year been so far, other than the obvious, Mrs. Lincoln?
Other than the obvious, I'll tell you one thing, and we are talking about it today. I really decided to put the noise aside, and it's very hard to not feel the anger, not feel the frustration that everyone else is feeling, and focus on me. What do I want to create this year? What's the energy that I want to put out this year? And what kind of impact do I want to make, both as a person, first as a person, and then second as a coach?
Well, that's awesome. I think that's an important step that people need to look at, because with all the stuff going on around us, I always go back to the question, what can you control, right? What are you able to really affect change around? And I go back to the circles, right? The concentric circles you have, right? You have like the world, then you have just like the smaller country or whatever you want to look at it. Then you have your social circle, and then you have you in like the very middle, right? And then maybe you have your dog next to you who you can't control him anyway. But what can you take? What can you actually control? You can control you. You can control your reaction to these things. You can control what you choose to do with your life, with your time, with your energy. You can't control what anyone else does. You can't control what anyone else focuses on. But all we can do is control how we invest our energy and how we choose to take what the world gives us and what to respond with. I did a webinar yesterday with Georgetown, and one of the questions came up was, with COVID and everything happening, how do you make a shift and do things differently with your job search or career search when your career is being affected really badly by COVID? And obviously it's a very specific situation, depends on the person. But if you take a step back, if you get too focused on, and if you zoom in too much, I think of the for lack of a less violent term or constant metaphor, but the sniper rifle situation, right? If you're looking through a scope and you're looking at your target the whole time, you're focusing on this one target, you're gonna miss everything else happening outside of that little scope you're looking at. So you have to look away from the scope once in a while. And so the same thing is true with your career. Same thing is true with life in general. If you get too focused and get the tunnel vision, where you're focusing on one thing and only looking at that one thing, you're not going to see any other opportunities that are around there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like what you said about where do you invest your time and energy. The way I've been telling a lot of clients is you can choose to focus on the problem or you can choose to focus on the solution. And that applies with global events. And like you said, these concentric circles, it applies to local and national events, but then it also very much applies to you as a person in your life. Not to ignore things, but what are the things that you are putting energy in? I like the metaphor of a balloon. So you've got this balloon, and the balloon could either be the problem or it could be the solution. So which balloon are you really focusing your intention on? And I think that comes back full circle for our talk today as to what's keeping us from achieving our goals. And I think a big part of it is we are so hyper focused on all the reasons why we cannot achieve our goals. And we're not really focusing on, as you say, the bigger picture solutions that might be just right around the corner. But we're so myopic in our thinking, you really cannot see the forest for the trees, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to kind of zone in on one thing you said, which is the finding a solution for the problem. I think I would actually reframe just for me personally. I think of it a little differently. I mean, we can see things as problems or we can see things as challenges, right? And a lot of times the stoic mentality, which I learned to really embrace recently in the last few years, is that the obstacle is the way, right? There's a reason that there's something stopping you from getting to what you want. And the only way to deal with that is to go through it. It's to really, push through that. And it tests your mettle, it tests your resolve. How badly do you really want what you're going after, right? And if you don't take the time to define, even before taking a step back to the goal definition or the setting intentions, if you didn't take time to understand why you want something or why you're going after something, why is this a goal for you, right? Why does it matter? Why is it meaningful to you? Going back to the SMART goal, like to our talk about SMART goals the last time we spoke before 2021 ended. Why is something meaningful for you? What is it going to change for you? If you don't take time to define that and really understand your why behind that goal, then any little challenge, any little bump in the road is going to make you question whether you want that or not. And that tells you really that really is extremely telling about, you know, if that thing is really important to you or not. Because if you get discouraged by the smallest challenge that comes up, maybe that thing's not that important to you, right? If you're ready to quit after something way out there happens, you're like, oh well, that happened over there that has maybe ripple effects, small ripple effects that are giving me a little bit of a wave, like a mile away, and I'm gonna give up and row back to shore. Then what was the point of even going out there to begin with?
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Drew. Ready for it?
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Tell us your goals for this year.
So one of my goals was to go hike and start the year hiking, which I did. I
Yes,
did
you
that.
did.
It was freezing in Utah, but it was amazing. I'm actually still driving. For those of you who don't know, I went out to Utah. I drove out there with Hachi, as you can see his head right here. He's chilling in the back seat. But I'm actually driving back to DC right now on the way back. Hell of a time to drive back, but it's actually a nice drive. It's pretty nice so far. I haven't gotten to the boring part yet, but I did hike. I hiked a shit ton, and it was amazing. I saw some of the most beautiful places I've seen ever, of natural places anyway. And it was just phenomenal. It was amazing experience. I want to be more active this year. That was one of my intentions for this year, to be more active. Another one was to be more successful business wise, which is I put some things in the works while I was out there, which is pretty cool. And so we're waiting to see what happens on that front. But those are my two big intentions for the year, was to be more successful business wise and to be more, I'd say, adventurous and get outside more and really just travel more with Hachi.
So if you could come up with one or two reasons, the yeah buts that might be coming up, just like all our listeners, they have their different goals and they probably have a couple of those yeah buts. What do you think
Mm-hmm.
your yeah buts are? And can you give us some ideas as to how you're going to work through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I get in my own way a lot of times, most of the time, honestly, specifically with business, right? Because you, especially as a business owner, as a person, as a coach to start, but as any business owner, you have this mentality of whenever you have to ask clients for money or basically be like, this is how much I charge. That's always, I mean, for me personally, I hate selling. I'm not a salesperson, right? And so when I get in the mindset, when I allow myself to get in the mindset of, oh, I'm selling this person, then that discourages me to begin with, right? So the yeah buts start coming up like, yeah, but maybe they can't afford it, but maybe it's too expensive, maybe I'm charging too much, or maybe this is, not the right time for them, and you start making excuses for them instead of saying, look, this is what it is. I'm gonna let them know what it is. If they can afford it, great. That's on them to decide, right? Maybe they can afford it, maybe they can't. Maybe this is the right time for them, maybe it isn't. But it's not for me to decide that for them. It's for me to make the offer
Absolutely.
and let them figure it out. How about you, Nahid? What are some of
Um,
your intentions for the year?
so one of the things that we talked a little bit about a few weeks back was I really want to do group sessions. And I have a very specific technique that I use. It's an energy technique. It's an energy healing technique that I recently got certified in, and I've never used it in a group setting. And to be quite honest, I had all these roadblocks that I threw in my way, and one of them was, as some of you may have remembered, my computer issues. So the moment this program was completely done, and let me tell you, it was done with slides, with marketing material, completely done, poof, everything goes. I crashed my hard drive, the files are irrecoverable, and I had to go back and ask myself, okay, what was that situation that was going through in my head that caused all of this to happen? So when I self sabotage, all these kinds of random events that I know aren't really random start to show up. And I had to kind of do what you said, which is to go back to why am I doing this? What is the purpose of me wanting to do these group sessions? And I want to be able to bring this information out in a wider way, and that's what groups help me do. So as soon as I took a step back, connected with the real reason for wanting to do this, right? All of a sudden, then things began to flow. I'm back into that place where Not everything, thankfully, was lost. I have my speaking notes, so I can go back to some of the things. Still have to recreate the slides, still have to recreate all of those other things. But I'm back into that place where I'm excited, whereas all these months I was just dreading having to recreate that wheel again.
Yeah.
So we
Uh,
get in
and
our
that
own ways, just like everyone else.
absolutely no. I mean, we're not immune as coaches, right? I mean, same way doctors get sick from diseases, so do we. We get sick from our mindset situations, right? We have to overcome our own stuff. I'll tell you something else. A funny story. Hannah already knows this because she saw the videos. But I was when we were driving down from DC to Baton Rouge on the way to. I was going to see my brother on the way to out to Utah, and we hit a huge blizzard. I mean, like a massive, massive blizzard. This is like you have a wall of white in front of you. So we're going like 15 miles an hour, and the drive from DC to Baton Rouge is not a short drive, even if you're
Yeah.
going normal speed. And it's normally like 17 or 19 hours, something like that. And we ended up going like 15 miles an hour for like 4 hours because this just a wall of snow is hitting us. And there's videos that I'm gonna upload later, but it was funny, not funny, right? I mean, like literally, we just got outside of we got to like Southern Virginia, and this wall of snow starts hitting. And the question comes up: do we really want to drive? Would it make more sense to fly? I mean, maybe we can still turn back at this point. It's an hour. We're gonna go back and just fly out there. And I'm like, no, I actually really want to drive. I've always wanted to do a cross country trip. I've always wanted to travel with Hachi. Like if I fly, I can't. It's gonna be harder, more complicated for me to fly with him. And I'm like, I really want to do it. Let's push through it. And we did it, and we got through. And it was insane. But again, it makes you question, like, are you really willing to do this? Right? Is it something that are you going to give up at the first chance that something starts going wrong? And I think that's the one of the hallmarks of any of the great stories that come up. Like if you look at any great hero's journey, um, in movies or literature, how boring would it be if they never faced any adversity at all, right? I mean, how boring would it be if everything just came super easy? That's why not to go on the nerd tangent, but that's why the new Star Wars trilogy is such crap, honestly, because Rey never has any actual adversity. Everything is just easy to overcome for her, right? So like, it's like if you have a hero who's overpowered, who has no challenges at all, then what happens, right? It just becomes a boring story.
I had this conversation with a client of mine, but I use it in a little bit more metaphysical terms. And I said that if you believe in a soul and you believe that soul is eternal and it's hanging out in the ethers doing whatever souls do in this perfect world, why would we come to Earth, have this earthly experience, and be exactly the same? Right? We are here to experience a life, good, bad, and indifferent, but we're still here to experience it because otherwise we might as well not even have this earthly experience. There's no purpose to it if we're not willing to kind of step in and say, hey, you know what? This is a self discovery process. For me personally, I've had to learn to trust myself. I've had to learn to acknowledge all the areas that I am good at, which I've never done in the past. So it's really a self discovery process. And you're right, if it all came too easily, it wouldn't, we really wouldn't have the same depth in our experience, I'd say.
Absolutely, and I think on top of that too, it's like I would say so self discovery is something that I've thought about for a while, and I'm like I think a year or two ago I decided I didn't like the term self discovery because it's less about discovering and more about creating, right? Self creation, right? Because you can, you know, discovery. I think it's just discovering, what appeals to you and that kind of thing. But it's like really also like creating it yourself because there's parts of you that you want to grow and you want to build and that you want to you have to build your skills in certain areas, right? If you have a passion for something, it doesn't mean you're automatically good at it. It just means you enjoy doing it. You might suck at it, right? You might take a sport for example. When I first started playing football, I loved it, but I sucked at it. I was really really bad. I wasn't great at it, so I had to keep practicing to get better at it because I really enjoyed it. Same thing with tennis or like any other sport, um, or any other real skill. And so I like to reframe it as a self creation process because I thought about the whole idea of like centering, right? And this is kind of where it came from for me. Was like when I was younger, I was like there's I was my tennis coach was telling me that there's a pitcher who would do this one thing every time before he took the mound to pitch, and he had this routine that he would do to get in the mindset of pitching and doing a great job, and he'd be amazing at it. And my first thought was, how did he know? How did he discover that thing to do for himself? Like I kind of switched it in my head. I was like, there was he had to discover this thing. He had to try a million things to find the one thing that made him get in the mindset to actually do well. When in reality, it's more about practice. It's switching around. It's creating that trigger for yourself, right? A positive trigger for yourself, where it's like you create this routine for yourself that gets you in the mindset, right? And so it's not about discovering that thing as much as it is creating that thing. You know what I mean?
I think what you're saying is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that is actually something that I use in my business. When I first started, for whatever reason, the end of the year was always a good period for people signing up for coaching programs. I have no idea why, and it was probably completely coincidental. But I took that one thing and I ran with it. And I kept telling myself every year, the end of the year, that's my best period. That's my best period. 7 years in, the end of the year always is my best period. Now I want to tell myself, okay, well then, there's nothing magical about the end of the year, right? I'm sure whatever it is that I consider for the end of the year, I can actually use for my goals throughout the year. And I think when we think about goal setting, one of the things that we perhaps don't pay as much attention to is what do we do that is working for us? Very focused on what doesn't work for us, right? We know that we need
Mm-hmm.
to change this, we need to change that. But taking a step back and saying, okay, these are the things that are working for me. And this kind of comes from the Gallup poll has this strength finders. That's what they
Mm-hmm.
call it. It's
Assessment.
personality test, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
according to the Gallup poll, and when they said this, it made a lot of sense to me. They said you can put in as much time as possible doing something that you're not never going to be really good at, and you'll get better, but you're never going to be really good. So they said, well, then take the time that you would have put something in that and actually do the things that you are really good at and get extremely good at it because the return you're going to get is going to be substantially higher. So kind of like what you're talking about as well. What are the things that we know that work really well that we can then continue to apply? And then sometimes the things that we don't do so well, like accountability, it's hard to be self accountable,
Mm-hmm.
outsources. Whether it's talking to a coach, whether it's getting a friend, getting an exercise buddy, or whatever it is, outsource those portions. We are so focused on trying to figure this whole thing out by ourselves. And generally speaking, anybody who's truly successful, they have a coach, they have a mentor, they have somebody that they have holding their hand at times when they need to be held.
Absolutely. And I want to point out one thing you said about outsourcing. The value of outsourcing cannot be overstated, honestly, especially as a business owner, right? I mean, you look at the business as at the work that is involved in being a business owner, and you essentially have when you're starting a business, you have like 5 different jobs, and each one of those is 40 hours a week. So, and then you try to add on more stuff. You're like, oh, I need to build a website. Let me do it myself instead of paying someone else to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need to do social media. Let me do it myself instead of paying someone else to do it. I need to do all this marketing. I need to do everything else. Let me do it all myself to try to save money. But you don't realize that as a business owner, your most valuable asset is not money. Your most valuable asset is your time. And when you are taking your 20 or 30 hours to learn how to build a website, and then taking another 30 hours to build the website, you've essentially used 60 hours where it maybe cost you $1,000 to pay someone to do a website for you, where it took you like maybe 4 hours to work with them to tell them what you want, and then they take 10 hours to get it done, right? So what's what's the value of your time, right? And that's just one example. But people, I fell in the same trap when I started business. I was like, oh, I'll just do it myself. I'm good enough. I'm technical enough. I can do it myself. I'm gonna spend all this time learning about all this stuff and trying to learn all the stuff that people have spent years learning, right? And I'm trying to absorb it all in like a week. It's not really gonna work very well. And I'm trying to do my business on top of that, by the way,
Right, exactly.
right?
You're running your business and doing everything else on top of it. But I will say it's not true just for business owners because when I think about my time in corporate America, I would have
Hmm.
loved to have had an executive coach. Now, I wasn't an executive at that time, but I would love to have had a coach to kind of help me move up the ranks, for example, to be able to know how to navigate various politics. Those are not the kind of things they teach you in school.
No,
And
not at all.
we use coaches. I have a coach for my exercise, so I have a personal trainer that I'm working with. I'm not going to take the time. I will never be able to be as good as she is. Let's just put it that way. And nor do I have any intention of being as good as she is. And why not just focus on the things that make me feel happy and that I'm good at, and let other people help me in the areas that, I don't feel like bothering with.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, I didn't mean it to apply to only business owners, but I think
Yeah.
it's specifically, especially relevant for business owners, but
It's
individuals as
very
well.
relevant for business
You
owners.
know, like you said, as an individual, right? As your first job out of college, you don't know what you don't know, first of all. But second
Which
of
is
all,
almost everything.
which is almost everything, right? You know that the subject matter maybe, right? But you don't know the politics of the place. You don't know the interactions between people. You don't know what people expect from you on a professional level. The first time so quick story. The first time I walked into a courtroom as a prosecutor, I had no freaking clue what the hell I was doing. I had no clue. I knew the law, but that's nothing procedurally, right? I mean, you know the procedure in terms of like, yeah, this is how things work in an ideal world, which is what they tell you in law school, what they teach you in law school. And I remember another movie reference, shocker for me. My cousin Vinny, right? The part where she's like, they're talking about. I don't know if you haven't seen the
I
movie because
have
you
seen that
watch
one.
movies. Oh, you have? Wow. Okay,
Yes,
first
I
time.
have.
Nice. Okay, cool. This is like mark the calendar. This is the first day in the heat. Has seen a movie that I referenced. I need to put this down on the day. The day is January 14th, 2021, and this is probably the only time you've seen the movie I talk about.
and
But
and not only that, I've not watched movies in the last decade. So anything
exactly.
old, I can somewhat agree that I probably have seen.
Okay, fair enough. So my cousin Vinny, the scene where he's like, where Lisa's asking him like, oh, you didn't look at you were doing in the courtroom. He's like, of course, like, it's like, didn't they teach you that in law school? He's like, no, they teach you procedure. They teach you contracts. They don't teach you, they don't teach you all the stuff you do in courtroom. It's like, why don't you go to court and watch? I'm like, well, I don't have time to go to court and watch. So same thing in law school. You don't have time to go to court and watch. You're studying all the time. You're like doing the books. You're like focusing on learning the law and studying for exams. You're not learning about procedure, about how to actually do practice law as a practicing attorney. And so you walk in, you have no clue what's going on, none. I mean, it would help a lot to be able to shadow someone or watch someone and hear what's going on with them and see what's going on with them and have someone who is able to be a mentor to you or a coach who could say, when you walk into the courtroom, here's some things to consider, right? And just allow you to make that transition a lot easier.
I tell you, my first job, I got into so much trouble. I mean, I got into so much trouble. I used to work as a lab assistant at the University of Maryland, and as a lab assistant, you basically are the grunt person. So if something needs to be done, you have to do it, right? There's no external help. So I got used to being able to change the printer cartridge, right? I mean, minor stuff like that. And I walked into my first job not realizing that there were very defined roles for very specific people. And I thought I was doing the tech team, which was basically the head of the department, so some VP and then one underling person. I was doing them a favor by not
Hmm.
calling them for trivial stuff that I could do. Turns
Yep.
out that my name used to be brought up in their board meetings as being someone who was constantly flouting the rules. And then I remember something happened with my supervisor, and I asked the manager for the day off and not the supervisor for the day off. And oh my God. And I
Yeah.
was just, and she started screaming at me. She was screaming at me. And I was like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I mean, it's a crazy situation. Honestly, it's like there's so much out there. Though. There's so much that you have to consider when you're going into from job to job. Even if you're an experienced person in what you're doing, right? Just from company to company, there's so much difference in the way people do things. Um, but going back to the goal setting question and understanding, like where the failure points are. Like you said, it's a matter of really understanding that there's there's stuff over here that you're worried about, right? And then there's stuff over here that you want to achieve. And those two things are not always related, even though they may both affect you. They're not necessarily related. The only connection may be you, right? And so being able to separate those things and say, okay, like this actually has no real impact on this over here, and being able to say, I'm going to still keep working towards this, even though all this crap is going on over here. I can deal with this and figure out how I want to deal with this separately. But this is still not really impacted unless you consider the fact that it's impacting me. And I can take some time off from this to do what I need to do to manage mental health or whatever that looks like. But at the end of the day, this is still possible. And I'm not going to sit there and be like, okay, this is not, I got to give up on this because of this over here, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, so I look at this similarly, but with kind of a different lens. So I'll say this how I talk to my clients about feeling resistance to accomplishing their goals. The
Mm-hmm.
first thing that I ask them is to figure out what are the top three emotions, negative emotions specifically, that come up when it comes to something. So, say you want to accomplish this, whatever this happens to be, and you're finding that you are not sitting down and doing the work or you're not getting the results that you're looking for. What are the top three emotions that come up? Usually frustration, disappointment, anger, resentment, those types of things. And then I ask them to close their eyes and think about when is the earliest time that they felt that way. And usually, what happens is if you just kind of let something bubble up, don't force the situation, but if you let something bubble up, you're going to start noticing patterns. And what I mean by that is there are probably several events that come to mind where you have the same emotions that you are today, and it's related to particular situations where you felt either not good enough, maybe not experienced enough, or in some way somebody or the other has made you feel like this is not going to happen or you don't deserve this thing. And understanding that connection, this is very subconscious. So understanding that connection and becoming aware of it then makes us think twice about how we are responding today. Because the way I explain it is that the person who's triggered is not you, the adult self. The adult self can be logical and analytical. You have life experiences to be able to do that. But the younger part of you that first experienced these events and first develop this belief that I'm not fill in the blank, whatever that happens to be, that's the part that's being triggered. So as soon as you have any kind of situation going on today that reminds you of something that happened before, again, it's all very subconscious. You're probably not sitting there actively thinking about it. But when that happens, then your old self with her coping mechanisms or his desires to, pull the brakes up, whatever it is, that's what comes up. And so that's what you want to focus on. And there's sort of the part that you need to heal in order to make that next transition.
Yeah, no, I like that. And that's actually, it's a kind of a parallel, almost similar way that I do work with folks and stuff. It's very similar to kind of shadow coaching that I talk about, which is basically at a certain level, it's examining not so much the negative emotions, because I think it's for me when I work with clients, it's more about looking at what's the benefit you're getting out of this thing, right? Out of this behavior, whatever behavior it looks like.
Right?
And a lot of times they don't think there's not an apparent benefit to them, but in reality, that there's a perceived benefit. It's not
Yes.
probably not true, but there's a perceived benefit to this behavior, whatever's happening. There's something that they think they're getting out of it by either doing something or not doing something. For example, like let's say losing weight, right? If people know they need to eat healthier, and they're just not eating healthier, they're just eating crap all the time. Just personal experience is what I do, right? The perceived benefit that I used to get out of that was that I enjoy my food. I can't possibly enjoy healthy food because healthy food tastes like crap. That was the belief, this idea I had in my head, right? And once you get to the bottom of that, you realize just that's just a false notion, right? It's not necessarily true. It's just something that you've created in your head to kind of protect yourself against whatever this looks like, right? And maybe it's a fear of failure, maybe it's whatever number of things it could be, but you have this perceived benefit that you're trying to persist and keep on giving yourself. And that benefit typically comes from, like you said, the child version of yourself. I call it the immature version of yourself, or the shadow, right? The shadow version of ourselves, which is either very selfish, very immature, very it just doesn't have, like you said, life experience to look at to say to really define the world in a more accurate way. Their definition of the world is very very basic, very lizard brain ish, right? Fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so often that's what it ends up happening. People who get triggered have this mentality of fight, flight, or freeze in situations that don't call for that, right? And so you kind of misalign these things. And when you can get those things back under alignment, and you can start like kind of rebuilding yourself from that bottom up, so that you're building on a stronger foundation, that's when you can really make the progress you want to make.
Yeah, absolutely. In order to make progress, your head and your heart, your mind and your body, your soul, body, whatever you want to call it, has to be moving in the right direction. There needs to be that alignment because otherwise, one part of you wants something, and then there's another part of you that's throwing up obstacles in the way, and then you start blaming yourself. Because then, oh, it's my fault. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not this enough. I'm lazy. I'm that, right? When it is not true, it's just literally you are fighting another piece of you, and the only person who is getting bloodied and bruised in this process is you, right? There's
Right.
nothing, nobody's winning. You're just getting even further beaten up in that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so, I notice we're running on time a little bit, so I want to see if there's any questions from folks who are watching. I'm not sure how many folks we have watching today, but if there are any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Hannah can let us know who's saying what because we can't see it right now. But if there are any questions, we can answer them for you. If not, we're gonna probably have to wrap up soon because it's 30 minutes flew by today. I feel like it passes a lot slower normally. It kind of flew by today, but I think it was a good discussion today. I really enjoyed it, despite being on the road here and outside of this rest area. It's a nice area here in
Yeah,
Mexico.
I'm sure it's great outside, and every now and then you want to be in a different location, get those neurons firing in different ways. I am jealous. I will tell you that I am jealous. I'm jealous that your dog is sitting so well. I'm jealous that he actually goes walking with you, and you're not like being dragged like crazy like my dog is. So maybe one
Oh,
day.
he tries sometimes, but he's gotten better over time. It takes time. It takes time to get used to it. You got to make sure you assert yourself as an alpha and continue doing that.
Yeah. Apparently, my husband's number one, and I have to battle it out with my dog with a who's number two and who's number three.
Yeah, no, my buddy who I was out there with, he's like, we draw together, and so Hachi looks at me as number one, and my buddy's like, yeah, he thinks I'm number five. He doesn't think I'm number four even, and I'm like, what are you gonna do? So
All right. Well, thank you again. This was really an important discussion because as we think about going through the year, really start focusing on what are the things that are working well for you, and then notice, okay, what's that shadow side, like you say? What's the shadow side that has an agenda and is doing something based on that agenda? Because once you understand what that is, what that perceived value, that perceived benefit, because there's always a benefit. You will not be doing something unless there's perhaps an emotional benefit. It may not be logical, it may not be analytical, but there is a benefit in there. And if you understand that, you are well on your way to success because then you can say, aha, this is why I'm doing it. It's not because I'm dumb. It's not because I'm stupid. It's not because I'm X, Y, and Z. This is what needs to be cleared. I think that's a very
absolutely,
important thing to people to know.
absolutely, and it's not even about fighting yourself. I think this is what you said too. It's not about fighting yourself. It's about understanding yourself, because again, it's perceived benefit. It's not like this thing is people you throw on the term self sabotage a lot, and it's not about self sabotage. It's about that perceived benefit seems to outweigh what the real benefit actually would be, right? And so until you clarify to your subconscious, to your shadow self that hey, this is not actually a benefit. It may be a short term benefit, maybe, but long term is not going to be a benefit. Then help them understand that, help that part of you understand that, and let yourself know that this is what the actual benefit is. This is going to benefit us in the long term. Let's do this. That's extremely powerful. But
Yeah, and that's when you become truly successful. That's
absolutely,
again, the head and the heart have to be together. I agree 100%.
yep,
All right. Well, would love to hear from the listeners to see how much you put this into effect and see if it actually makes a difference, right? That we'd love to be able to hear on how much this is helping.
absolutely, yeah. And just a reminder to folks, we are still doing that Zenit Journals giveaway. Send the heat if you want to promote that to folks as well. If you, I don't know if you remember, Alina Liao is the local business owner in DC. She makes these journals by hand, like literally by hand. She sews them together.
Wow.
So they're all customized journals, and so we're giving one away at the end of January. So we're gonna do a little what do you call it, drawing for that. I can't talk right now, but we're doing a drawing later this month for that. So if you do want to enter, follow the directions in the description and let us know what you think about today's live chat. If you want to see any future topics, please let us know. But I think this is a great way to kick off 2021. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. If you did like it, please hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment below. Let us know any questions you might have. If you are struggling with anything, goal related or mental health related in general, and please, seek out, reach out to a friend, reach out to Nahid or myself, or just, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Though
Yeah,
today's
absolutely.
world is a little bit crazy, and just self-care is extremely important. So do what you can do. All right.
Thank you very much, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of January. And we'll see each other soon enough.
2 weeks. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yes, end of January.
Yes. All right, guys. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye bye.